All right, folks. Well, here's where we get behind the wants and start to filter for the real reasons that are driving us, the real whys. If you say you want to look like, Thor or a supermodel, we need to ask why. We are looking for honest and healthy reasons you fully believe in and agree with, versus the false and unhealthy motives that won't drive you where you will find fulfillment. So today, we're going to get solid on our motives and look at two primary imposters. And yeah, this is me doing solo. If you listen to my other shows, I don't often do solo shows, but here in this motive, some of these initial shows are me just going through the tenets of this message on clarifying our motives, our reasons for everything we want to do. Well, number one, imposter is should. It may not be revelatory to you, but listen in for a little bit. Should. You probably heard in jest somebody talking about, oh, you should on me, or I shouldn't should on you. My wife will say that. Sorry, I just should all over you. But when a so-called desire, think about this, feels laborious, when you say it with a sigh, or you roll your eyes, or you joke about it, chances are very, very high it is a should. Teenagers are classic here because anything that they are asked to do outside of what they want to do can often be felt like a should. I've got some of the most rock star teenagers in the world, and yet we deal with this should aspect a lot. But when you are striving and striving to succeed and you apply, again, I've talked about this before, the same math of effort to an area of life that gives success in certain areas, but you're missing the mark in another area. Let's look and see, is that an area, something you're going forward to, or a destination or a goal that is a should? It's something you're doing because of an expectation of someone else. Okay. The expectation of someone else. We all know that should, or just the expectation we feel from the culture, or an expectation just from yourself. It's not something you truly authentically want for yourself. And sometimes, often, we're just not aware. It's such a basic issue. We tend to just, scoff or chuckle and not give it the gravity that it deserves. We've let shoulds become normal. And they are, just like being obese with multiple chronic illnesses that you take daily medication for here in America has become normal. Habitually pursuing and striving to achieve things that we should do does not produce fruit. It doesn't bless and fulfill you. And check this out. It doesn't bless and fulfill whoever you think you're trying to please. When you're being driven, actually on that though, yeah, I learned that painfully. I'll talk about that a little in here, but painfully, of when I am doing something that is a should, generally the receiver of that is not blessed either. They can feel it, or I just become lesser because I'm going after this thing that I don't really want to do. And if I am lesser, I'm worse for everybody involved, my family, my people I work with, the culture, humanity, whatever. When you're being driven by a should, you are either destined for failure, it's not going to happen, or you're going to have a large amount of stress. And if you do reach the intended goal, it's going to be with a lot of collateral damage. And that's really interesting. We can see two people going after the same thing and doing the same activities even. And one of them is just, rocking it, is thrilled, is fulfilled at the end. And one is devastated. And that's because one was authentically wanted it, and the other, it was a should. When you're being, again, driven by a should, destined for failure, or you're going to have a lot of stress and collateral damage. This is where you see someone, again, achieve that big goal and find no ultimate joy or fulfillment in it. We see that in people going over and over and achieving this, and they're never fulfilled. They may even be bitter because of it. Or again, you see collateral damage everywhere, which is the opposite result of an authentic motive, drive, and desire. Whereas you succeed toward this true want, you see it's kind of like all the ships rise, where the tide rises. You've heard that. If you've got success in an area that you really want success in, as you achieve it, you get success in other areas of your life. That's the rising tide that raises all ships. Whereas an unauthentic goal is like delivering a glass of water to someone dying in the desert, only to hand it to them while you breathe your last breath and pass away. Again, a should is when you don't truly want it for yourself. You want it for someone else, or cultural pressure, or an expectation, even from just an unhealthy or exposure. Should is what causes yo-yo dieting, for instance, When you truly want something for yourself, you seldom just totally fall off the wagon and gain all the weight back, as yo-yo dieters do. Should honestly runs the weight loss industry. I've been a lifetime entrepreneur. And I think I've talked about this before, but I'll repeat it again. I ran an organization which helped people in traditional employment pursue self-employment. And during this time, I errantly held up self-employment as a holy grail of human achievement and a big should. I should on a lot of people. Not only was this a disservice to my clients and members, but I caused friction with my kids even as they got older, began looking at vocations. I'll never forget my oldest son finally admitted that he knew, Dad, I know you believe, self-employment is the holy grail, but I just don't feel it's a fit for me. And honestly, I felt like a dog. I also had some other friends call me out on this perspective that I was advocating. And from it, I realized that while I greatly appreciate the freedoms and opportunities self-employment provides, the point I really cared about was just that people having freedom and opportunity to be all they can be and do all they can do. If you can find freedom to work in your talents and giftings at something you believe in, or enjoy, and the opportunity to grow and fully express yourself in a traditional, W-2 job, great. The point is your fulfillment. But my gosh, I should on so many people for so long with self-employment. I regret that. As a parent, you parents out there, well, if you're not a parent, you're a child of a parent. As a parent, it's awfully hard not to should on your kids. And that's why so many of us go into our youth and young adulthood pursuing things we naturally think we should do. We're should on by our parents, our siblings, our family at large, our teachers and early employers, our friends and social groups. And to a degree, it's incredibly hard not to be primarily influenced by others and their well-intended shoulds. We cannot stay in a bubble and avoid cultural shoulds. But again, as a parent, it's impossible for me not to should on my parents just by proxy of espousing anything that I think is good or I'm excited about. I mean, what I have to do is undergird it by helping my kids, one, know themselves, biggest one, and two, get exposure to other influences on opportunities, and three, and I think paramount, educate them in just this, shoulds, and the fact that I can't not should on them. They need to know the game and they need to question and discern even everything that I bring forth to them. Because that right there is what we generally are never exposed to, the concept of questioning and discerning. What do we truly want? And have the freedom to admit it. And just as importantly, and maybe even more tangible, what we admittedly do not want. I mean, what if you don't want to go to college? You don't want a regular 9-to-5 job, or you do. You don't want a fancy car or a big home or to live in the city or in the country. You don't want to get married or have kids or enter the rat race. Again, to ask ourselves, I mean, there's no place. It's like, schooling our upbringing in the culture, I think worldwide, but especially in American culture that I know, we are not taught how to be, for instance, entrepreneurs. That's not taught in school. You have to learn that outside of that. It has no place in school curriculum and I think even in college curriculum for the most part. I know there's exceptions and whatnot, but generally the masses of kids coming out of school and whatnot are not taught entrepreneurship, and most of their parents don't know what to teach them. Similarly, this isn't about entrepreneurship. I'm just using that as an example that I readily know, but similarly, we are not ever really asked with discernment and care, what do we really want? What really fits us? It's just not a part of growing up unless you have very special parents or there's a very special influence or mentor in your life. So this is something that just doesn't happen for most people. And most people are going to go to their grave never having asked themselves that. And that's why we have, I believe, so many literal deathbed regrets. You can type that in. It's really interesting. I think there's books and stuff, but you can just type in deathbed regrets. Really interesting stuff to read what bubbles to the top. But a lot of it is from people not being aware of themselves, not being aware of what they really wanted and doing a lot of things for the wrong motives. And my point isn't to call everyone to buck the norm, as I list out questions on whether you want to go to school or have a job or whatever, but again, only to question it in your heart of hearts. And again, this isn't easy because it does take personal awareness that you may not have. I mean, none of us are perfectly, wholly self-aware. I'm not, I never will be, but I hope to continue to grow in that. And as I do, I will progress. I am such, on that idea of this isn't just to call everybody to buck the norm, but to question it. I'm such a proponent of bucking the norm that my kids struggle with feeling that they should buck the norm, and they can feel guilty admitting that they do want to do something that is normal. And I have to allow for that if I'm going to bother them well. Though in that, I'll say, hey, just whatever I say and whatever you're looking at, just question it. Question it. Know yourself and question it. I mean, I work so diligently as a father and influencer to curb the shoulds that I unknowingly inflict on everyone, because it's impossible not to. But the best I can do is, again, admit and be open with my biases and let my family feel safe to disagree and have different tastes and propensities and to experience and research. In episode 7 of this Motive podcast, I covered 7 areas where we desire, pursue, and find fulfillment. In all 7 categories, there are prominent shoulds to consider regarding what you think you desire. For me to go through that would be a ridiculously long podcast, and I'm not going to do that here. I'll do that in my upcoming online course, and it will be in my upcoming book. But as of this recording, that's going to be a year out at this point. But physical health and wellness, let me use that one. It's just an easy muse for the concept, as it contains one of the greatest shoulds of our society, of our world, I think. Ask yourself how you want to feel, what physical abilities you want to have, and how you want to look. That one right there, the latter, how you want to look regarding physical appearance, may be king of all human shoulds. It's at least should royalty, top of the list. By far and large, people strive to look a certain way because they feel they should. And this is what fuels the diet industry, literally. I mean, the billions of dollars flowing into it are primarily from those who think they should look a certain way, but don't honestly want it for themselves. Not enough to stick with a vision. They want it for a spouse, for their perspective with a spouse or a prospective mate or their social group or the image they see in the media or, even from their doctor. I mean, the statement of, I should lose weight. As of this recording, we're about to hit the new year in 2021, and that'll be top of the list. I should lose weight. It's probably spoken, though, a few million times per day at all times of the year. I mean, if should is part of your vernacular in any endeavor, you will realize one of 3 options. Either, again, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen temporarily and not stick, or it will come at the price of exhaustion, frustration, and bitterness. And I know this last one well. I have a list of endeavors that I technically achieved with great bitterness. I mean, you ask my wife. I'm very competent at achieving shoulds with bitterness. If there's a Hall of Fame, I would be in there. I'm a lot better today. I still come back and struggle with it, though. But for physical appearance, I think it's near impossible. Okay, let me backtrack a second. Impossible to not have thoughts of others in regards to how we appear. I mean, if we were the only person on planet Earth, we're going to never see another person. What would it matter? Now, it would matter to me as far as how I feel, but as far as how I looked in the mirror, I mean, who cares when I go on my individual getaways, which I do about every quarter or so, and I'm gone for 3 or 5 days by myself? I don't ever look in a mirror. Even if I go out, who am I trying to impress? My wife's at home. But so it's impossible to not have thoughts towards others. But the core issue is our spirit behind it. I know many husbands and wives who wish their spouse would look after themselves, and who begrudgingly that spouse then tries to eat better and exercise and tend to their health in certain ways, but it generally never results in much more than just increased irritation, disappointment, and bitterness between them, because the one spouse is just doing it because of a should. Then I know others who are stoked to be well for each other. My wife, she likes it when my shoulders look wide and broad and muscular, and my hair has some body to it and is clean, and I'm clean shaven, and I smell nice, and I'm looking and feeling virile. Well, I'm stoked to do that for her. It's not a should, man. I'm happy to have her happy with how I look. I get great benefits for that. And, on my end of it, I feel better about myself if I look well and feel better about myself, but she reciprocates it as well. So there's no shoulds happening here. So again, we're talking about the spirit. To be candid, my wife would like to have me joining her in more family planning and financial planning, of which I don't like. Okay. So I'm going to admit that candidly. I don't like those. Historically, I've come to the table with those topics as a should, and it doesn't work out well. I really have to check my spirit. The point being, again, regarding shoulds, coming from outside expectations. The point is not necessarily, I think I said at the beginning of the show, to eradicate. It's so hard to eradicate things that are in our nature, but we can't, in this scenario, we can't eradicate outside influences, but making sure our spirit is right regarding it is paramount, or it's not going to work out well. The ends don't necessarily justify the means. I mean, if you make a list of all the things you're pursuing, all the things you're working toward, all the things you would say you want, filter through them and ask if it's something you want outside of anyone else's expectations. But again, it's not always a specific person. It could be the culture. I mean, you don't need feedback from a specific person to feel that you should have all the trappings of life. I mentioned before, school and jobs and cars and homes and amenities and vacations and more. I mean, we expect everyone wants all these things, right? Including ourselves. But do we? I mean, I have a 14-year-old son. We're at the height of all time, of smartphone and cell phone usage and whatnot. I have a 14-year-old son who attends high school, at face-to-face these days, a little bit, even with COVID, but he goes to the high school and he doesn't have a smartphone and a cell number, which is unheard of. Even adults question him. Well, God bless him. The guy just doesn't care. I'm so grateful for that. But what about you? Do you like, wearing a suit and tie? Do you really want to be a stay-at-home mom? Do you like attending church? Do you really want a newer car? Do you like sitting in a class and listening to a teacher to learn? And the list goes on and on. I mean, with the advent of social media, where we are constantly barraged by what people have and we don't, we are at an all-time high of pursuing things we don't truly want or care about. Last, and I'll admit to also manufacturing shoulds in and of myself. I mean, as I've worked through my own list, I've realized that I've taken on many I created them. I manufactured them. I'd view, successful people or endeavors and just in and of myself, take on those pursuits from this idealistic view. And I didn't literally desire them. And it took me a long time. And, I just like the idea of them, the image of them. But after lots of time and money and investment, I realized I'm not getting any joy. I don't really care. And I'm just wasting my time. I need to let that go. And now, let me cover all this with the reality, a big caveat. I want to say, have extreme ownership. Only do what you truly want to do for yourself. If it's not authentically your want and your desire, it's a should, you need to let it go, right? But that's not realistic either or sustainable. And I'm married. I've got 9 children and 3 grandchildren. I do a lot for other people's benefit. And I have a thoroughbred pedigree in making Herculean efforts to try to please and appease and gain approval and fulfill shoulds and be Superman. Though a lot of the times the should, it's just something I'm putting on myself. And for me, it was reaching a breaking point. And with the help of some counseling and realizing my folly here, but the point wasn't just stopping all I did for other people. Some of those shoulds fell under responsibilities that were in fact mine. The difference though was dealing with my attitude. I needed to step back and, get an attitude adjustment, as Zig Ziglar famously coined. I mean, for me, big help came in the form of admitting I'm not actually God. I'm not in control of everything. And while I do have responsibility for a lot, I can't control every environment. I can't control, nor am I responsible for every feeling or behavior. And do I really have room to complain as much as I do about these so-called shoulds? Why am I not more grateful? Here's an analogy for you. We live on a bunch of acreage in a national forest in the mountains of Colorado. I have 3 long segments of driveway that converge around our property. I don't know if it's a 1/4 mile of driveway or 1/2 mile of driveway, but it's a lot of driveway. With the winters up here, keeping it plowed is a chore, but we got a lot of family, so we need to keep it plowed. I actually have neighbors who do a lot of it for me, gratefully. And they do all the main roads in our little so-called neighborhood valley. But to really clean up our area for, the parking we need and everything for our family, especially during holidays, I do have a plow on an old Jeep. And I really, really don't like doing it. It's difficult, it's violent, and I'm just not great with machinery. I find myself trying not to curse under my breath and stamping around. And then I caught myself one day sitting back and go, really? Here I am living my dream. I have this big family, amazing family, this big home on big land and a big forest on a big mountain. And I'm complaining about plowing the long driveway that gives us the privacy that I so adore. And in truth, again, my neighbors do so much of it for free. I can actually afford to pay someone to come out and plow, but I'm too unorganized to plan ahead, and I'm impatient. And I want it just done right now. And so I do it myself, and I'm complaining. And so there we generally have added opportunity for attitude adjustments along the way. And so as we look at this should, is it a should we need to get rid of, or is it a should we just need to get rid of our crappy attitude? But another side of this, I'm a yes man to my wife generally, though not always out of a good spirit. I'm prone to say yes no matter what, because I want affirmation and approval and to medicate my self-image needs, or I'm doing it just to safeguard myself against conflict. Don't like conflict. So as I'm trying to work out this, I'll never forget my wife asking me one time, it's probably a couple of years ago. Hopefully it was longer than that. Maybe it was 3. She asked me to run into town for something, I think. And I felt this drop in my spirit, feeling spent at the end of the day, but I just said yes. And I think I even said it with a, nice tone and headed out the door. And then boom, because again, I'm working through this, trying to be aware, and my personal awareness kicked in, and I realized I'm doing this, but I'm going to have a bitter spirit. It's a should. And it was a really acute one. And I knew that also that what she was asking, it wasn't that big a deal or that necessary. And so I walked back in, I said, "Hun," I said, "I'm so sorry. I just said yes, and I could go do it. But if I do, I don't have a right heart with it. I'm just kind of worn out. And I don't know. I'm just struggling with bitterness." She literally smiled. And it kind of, in essence, it was almost like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." She was actually happy that I was honest with my feelings, which I unfortunately am not prone to do. And she was happy to see me working out of this ill health she knew I was in. So, again, looking at those shoulds, where should I change my attitude? And where should I say, no, I'm doing that out of a bad heart, and that's not good for anyone. So there is, I hope, I did justice and give you a rundown of shoulds. But again, if you do the exercise and go through and see how many of the things that you are doing on a daily basis, on a weekly, on a monthly, on a year, big things that aren't authentically you, it doesn't give you joy. It doesn't give you energy. It drains you. That's a should. Should equals guilt. It's wildly inefficient and ineffective. Ditch the effort, or, ditch the perspective, change your attitude, whatever you got to do. All right. Number 2, imposter. I like to give you a witty, mysterious, or just really hard-hitting title. Maybe my editors will help me come up with one for the book. But it's plain and simple, even in its insidious enormity, is just a hidden driver. A hidden driver, something driving you that you're not aware of. It's a motive. It's your reason. You're not aware of it. You're blind to it. It's where you're constantly, again, getting poor results in your life. It's tempting to say where you're getting poor results. You've probably seen some quote relating to this. It's tempting to say that we're getting what we want. It was actually a guy named W. Edwards Deming, and he famously quoted, "Every system is perfectly designed to get the result that it does." So where we are getting poor results, we can generally find a reason that supports the poor outcomes. And it's a driving force you are not cognizant of. And I've shared this before, but I'll do it again, as it's just my own story of hidden drivers. About my mid to early 20s, I got involved with a number of older businessmen and influencers at a deep level, lots of behind the scenes and insider information. I saw many motives for power and status, and not truly caring for the people and audiences that they purported to be devoted to. And then one man specifically, who was a significant mentor, and he had a fall from grace. And a conscious question I then had was, can you be a financially successful businessman and truly care for other people? Can you have morals and ethics and love and still make a lot of money? I didn't even like the term businessman at that point. That's where it started, this seed of bitterness towards the term businessman. However, I'm really poor at following others and submitting to authority. And I like to work out my own ideas freely and unfettered, which that bodes for self-employment. I really didn't question it. I just went forward, starting businesses around ideas I cared about, and never consciously reconciled this dilemma of not liking being a businessman. I am one, but I don't like the term. And what followed were many years and many businesses that I ran, the business like an idealistic nonprofit, kind of like a ministry. I never had any sound financial plans in place, and I ultimately sabotaged the finances over and over. And what was the hidden driver? Well, I wanted to prove I was all about heart and caring for people and not about money or acclaim. And I achieved that goal. People testified to how much I helped them and meant to them, while I nearly went bankrupt over and over. I defaulted on paying others, and the last person I ever paid was myself, my family. So while striving to be the super provider, super dad, and super husband, my wife once exclaimed, the best way I could love the family was just go make some actual money. I mean, if you'd asked me if I wanted to make money in my business, I would have authentically said yes. I mean, who's going to say no? And I'm sure I really thought that I did, or at least couldn't get my brain around accepting that I really didn't. But my primary motive, again, what was driving me was to desperately prove I was all about heart and service and not money, status, power, and acclaim. And I was so unaware, it caused me just a lot of hardship, this hidden driver. I mean, look again at the areas you're getting poor results in, where you're frustrated, and look for, are there any hidden drivers? And you're going to have to pay attention. Because they're driving you the wrong direction, you're getting frustrating results. And I see this manifest often in, again, otherwise successful people. They have areas of their lives within the 7 categories I talk about of fulfillment where they are having success. The success makes sense. It again gives them energy. They're fulfilled. They do the work. They get the results. The math works. It feels good. It looks good. And it truly is good. And then there are these categories, 1 or 2 or whatever, where things just aren't working out. They're seemingly, you're doing the right thing, just as in the successful categories. And it's mind-boggling and massively frustrating when the math doesn't work out the same in this other category. I mean, that was my story in spades. And as daddy, I did certain things and made these efforts and got positive results. It was great. Beauty. As an athlete, I put in the appropriate training, prepare myself, bolster my confidence, then give it my all, and boom, I'm on the podium, prize money in hand. Then over here in business, I'm putting the same math in place, and part of it is working out. I mean, people I'm serving testify to value I provide, and I gain applause and recognition. The business grows, but where's the money? Even if I made good money, somehow it was disappeared. I found some way to get rid of it. It was just nonsensical. It seemed nonsensical, but it really wasn't. It made perfect sense as I was dutifully obeying the hidden driver in me. Back up to that thing. I was doing a system. It was working out perfect. I was doing good, but eschewing money. In that regard, I was, again, a perfect success, an obedient servant to my motive. And that's the point here. We're all obeying our motives, and we always will be. So just like appetites, we need to manage and upgrade those appetites, and there we'll find success and the fulfillment that we want. Let them go astray, we'll suffer the consequences. So the exercise again here is to look at the areas in our life. You can go back to that motive, episode 7, go through those areas and see. You can even just make it simple. Just look at where the area, if you have an area and you're kicking butt, you're good with it, fine, skip the next one. Where are you frustrated? Where are you not fulfilled? Where are you languishing, not satisfied, sad, angry, whatever it is? What is your motive there? What is the motive you're pursuing in this area? What's really driving you? What's the reason for what you think you want? If it's not a should, okay, I think that's a little easier to figure out sometimes. It's not a should, then I'll wager it's a reason, something's driving you astray that you're not aware of, and you're going to need help seeing it. It's hidden to you. You're blind to it. But it's probably not far from the surface, and it's probably closely tied to self-image issues, ego issues, hurts or wounds. I mean, if you have the benefit of people close to you in your life who you trust, ask them what they see driving you, and list out the 7 areas or a specific area like I've covered. I mean, because if you'd asked my wife back then, what she saw driving me overall, man, she would have given positive feedback, I think, about, my love for family and care for others and desire to do good. But if you'd ask her, what's driving Kevin financially? I think she'd have likely said it was apparently some blind drunk person is driving him. I mean, so look, a few people ever become aware of and clarify these 2 imposter motives that are relentlessly driving them through their lives, shoulds and hidden drivers. But now you can. And the drum I'll continue to beat is you don't have to eradicate them. This is about awareness. I still worry about coming off like I'm seeking people's money. I'm going to be selling some of my own products here soon. And I'm going to be trying to provide something, and I'm happy to take your money. I'm happy. You hear that? I am happy to take your money, but I want it to sound like I'm there to care for you, not just there for your money or feeding my ego. I've made peace with making money, and lots of it. I know my motives to do good are true. Providing value to others is worth compensation. And with more money, I can better bless my family, do more of the work that I think that matters. So I'm having success. The hidden driver still exists. The concern is still there. It's just no longer hidden. It's out. I can wave to it, work around it. So can you.